4 p.m. on Monday, March the 21st. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. All right. In attendance tonight from the board, we have myself, Michael Reed Jeffries. I do not see Mr. David Blatt. I see Brian Leighton. There we go, Dave. David Blatt. We have Brian Leighton, Peter Beardmore, Matthew Allison, Greg Roy, and Christina is absent, or she'll join us a little later. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel. The recording of this meeting will be available on the Lunenburg Public Access YouTube channel within 24 hours. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, this public meeting is being conducted remotely. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. Public participation is encouraged and public comments may be welcome during committee member discussions at the discretion of the chair. And so again, we're calling the meeting to order. Are there any comments tonight from the public? Any comments tonight from the committee?
Hey, Michael, I just want to ask if you intend to record this to Zoom. In the past, we've done that, and I don't know if that's our protocol or not. There we go.
Yep, there we go.
All right, that's my comment.
Right. Any other comments tonight? All right. So the first thing on our agenda tonight is a discussion on the calendar and the execution of our charge. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong date, the wrong agenda here, because I'm like, that's not the first thing on our agenda tonight. Sorry about that, guys. Let me just go ahead and pull up the correct agenda for tonight. So at the last meeting, as we went over our charge, one of the things that came up. So the first thing on our agenda tonight is a discussion of some key takeaways with the former building reuse committee members. So before we get into the studies, as you know, tonight we do have Jamie Toll and we also have Dave McDonald, and both were asked to come tonight to share some of their experiences. I want to start with Jamie. And Jamie, you sent me a chronology. I think that would be really helpful to go over. Would you like for me to screen share that, or would you like to screen share that?
I'd prefer if you did.
Okay. All right. Let me go ahead and do that then. All right, and let me know if you can see this okay. Can you all just see the building reuse chronology?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Michael,
That looks good.
Michael, can you zoom that in a little bit?
All right, so Jamie, if you want to get started here, and just kind of take it away.
Sure, and I'll try to be brief, but I spent some time going over our records and looking at some videos and some things, and it kind of jogged my memory as well. So I'll give you a skeleton outline, and then if you want to spend any time on any of it, I'd be happy to. The Building Reuse Committee was formed in November, December of 2013. And I see here the first item on the chronology is July of 2013. Came across a meeting note from December of 2013. And at that time, the town meeting and the ballot vote for the new middle high school was just about to go before the townsfolk in January of what would be, I guess, 2014. And because of that, the selectmen formed this committee, and the purpose of the committee was to begin to do a little bit of discussion and put some things together that if the town were to approve the middle high school, what would become of some of the other buildings in town, predominantly the TC Passios, which was going to be vacant as a result of that activity. Our original charter included the Eagle House, the Brooks House, the Ritter Building, the Town Hall, and the TC Passios. A committee was put together. It was a kind of a cross-organizational committee, and it included members of the Historical Society, the Planning Board, the School Committee, and the selectmen, of course. And it included a couple of citizens at large, and we were fortunate enough to get citizens at large that included Dave McDonald and Ron Albert, who have careers in the architectural and building trades and were very important members of that committee. In addition, we had two architects in that. Pat Slattery was on the original committee representing the Historical Commission, and Damon McQuaid was on the original committee representing the Planning Board. Both of them are architects. So we had a pretty high-powered group of people that were there at the very beginning to take a look at the charter from the selectmen, to look at, what do we do with these buildings? What are we doing in them now, and what should we do with them in the future? A couple of things happened early in the process. One was that the Eagle House dropped off because the Council on Aging in the very first round kind of said, we have space, it's meeting our needs now and probably in the future, so we don't really need to be a part of this. And the committee kind of agreed that was probably true. In addition, in April of 2014, the old primary school was added to our charter. And the reason for that is we finally came to the realization that that building, which had been in mothballs for a while, but under serious consideration for a project to become a facility for seniors, wasn't going to get the funding it had hoped to get. And that's a real long discussion, but basically there was a developer by the name of Jewel, I think his name was, who had been looking for federal money and then state money, and the selectmen, prior to the creation of all these groups, had kind of held that building in abeyance while he looked to get funding to do some things in the senior space. Along around early 2014, it became apparent that he wasn't going to get his funding, and that became part of the quote inventory that we were asked to look at. As you go through some of those different committees, committee meetings and milestones, some of the things that I'd like to share, just in a 50,000 foot view, is that our original presentation to the selectmen, after a pretty intense couple of months, but early first couple of 2 or 3 months of the committee's existence, we recommended that basically we put all our eggs into the current town hall, and we develop a plan to declare the Ritter Building, the Brooks House, and the Passios as surplus. And that was kind of based on a lot of things, but at the time, our needs going forward only included municipal office space. And there's a lot of ways we got there, but to boil it down for you, the employees in the Ritter Building and the town hall who were doing town-only work, not associated with the schools in any way, or PAC, or any of the non-municipal employees, required at the time approximately 16,000 square foot. And we believe that some combination of the 6,500 or so square foot in the current town hall and an expansion of that based on some design plans that had been put together back in the 90s, we could spend a couple of $1 to $6 million, depending on which iteration, and to get all that municipal activity in town hall and make the other buildings surplus. And there was several discussions on what that meant. Along about the same time, we created the Architectural Protection District. We created the Village District, a lot of different things that went into place to protect the integrity of our history, our buildings, all the different historical commissions and different people who had a concern about what would happen to all those other things. But the thought process at the time was, with all those protections in place, we would look for other uses, probably other uses that might come out of the private sector for those properties, and we'd go after developing the town hall as our municipal offices. Kind of interestingly, early in that process, a couple of things happened. One is we determined that we really couldn't do that. Well, let me step back a bit. The votes in early January were that the school was going to be built, that the Passios was going to be eventually empty, and that we now had to, actually figure out what the long-term plan was for all these buildings. Couple of things went through my mind, and I know I'm rushing kind of through a couple of years of history here, but the town hall fell off the plan when we realized that we really weren't going to be able to do, for any kind of reasonable amount of money, a renovation of town hall to get the municipal space in there. Our view then kind of looked quickly to, gee, could we do it at the Ritter, either in an existing capacity or with some kind of expansion? And what came to pass, the big first major milestone, I guess, was August of 2015. TAPE came into the picture and did a study that was a little more intense than what the building reuse groups had done up until that point. And in 2015, the TAPE group did their study, came back with several options. The building reuse committee wrestled with all those options and ultimately came up with a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that was presented near the end of 2015 into 2016, that said we were going to choose the option that said the municipal offices were going to go into a portion of the TC Passios building. And at the original discussion of that, it was about a third of what currently exists in the Passios. And the other 2/3 were talked about in this way. One is we left it to the selectmen to decide, do you want to tear down a third of the building, which was the wing that kind of went out towards the back, or do you want to look for alternative uses for that? And the other thing was, there's a gym and a gymnasium in that building now. Do you want to, we don't need that for municipal offices, but do you want to keep that because it's, gym space and cafeteria space? And do you think it might be helpful for the town? And the selectmen and various town meetings kind of wrestled with all that. And we came to what I began calling the plan of record that said we were going to move forward with the Passios as the target for municipal office space. And at the same time, we'd have some space available for the town's use in terms of the cafeteria and the gymnasium. And then several things happened, as you guys are all aware of, where other various groups, the PAC group, the Boys and Girls Club, the school, decided that they kind of wanted to put in some ideas and have some discussions around using that third wing, and a kind of decision was made, we're probably not going to tear it down. We're going to use it. And I think that grew to the point where you guys went through your work in your last iteration and kind of came up with the fact that your list of requirements was even bigger than the 57,000 square feet that exists in the walls of what we now know as the Passios. Along with that, and we can go into kind of details on all of it. There was an awful lot of hue and cry about, but we still have to keep the town hall because of its historical significance, and we really still love the Ritter, and there's a reason to want to care about the primary building, and we really don't want developers coming in and putting up big box stores and high rises and all sorts of other things. And so we got stalled on what to do with any of the properties that we didn't have earmarked for our own current use. And that, now we sit with what amounts to a fairly long laundry list of requests for space that the town needs to provide for various groups, a fairly significant portion of use that is what I would consider school use, whether it be formal Lunenburg school department day-to-day use, or extended day, or special needs, or some of the other things, and some other groups who have requirements in that space. I have extensive notes on various iterations of this, but I wanted to kind of lay out a timeline that got us to originally looking at the town hall as our solution, moving to the Ritter for our solution, quickly ending up at the Passios for our solution, and now you guys talking about tearing it all down and kind of starting with a purpose-built building. And I'd be happy to fill in any of those holes as we go along. One of the things I probably should mention, though, is that beginning in 2013, we were trying to be very, very frugal, and we weren't doing anything unless we had a way to pay the bills of existing space, or a plan to create enough revenue from disposal of the buildings to pay for what we were proposing. So we were kind of hamstrung in a lot of ways, in that, there was a group called FLAC, which was a cooperative out of Lunenburg and Fitchburg that was renting space in the Passios, which kept it open for a couple of years. The PAC group was paying rent. The Lunenburg Ledger was in the Brooks house paying rent. And we didn't, although a couple of times we put out various feelers to try to get people interested in buying our property, we never really had a clear mandate to sell anything. So we didn't generate any planned or projected revenue. So all these things were done trying to be fiscally conservative as we went forward. And as a result, it created a couple of town meetings where we went in with a plan, and we're asked to go get more data. How are you going to pay for that? What are you going to do with this, etc. Again, like I said, I have extensive notes. I have various PowerPoint presentations that were made at different times. There's an excellent YouTube video from the December 13th meeting, the first time we presented. There's another selectman meeting that we did in December 2015 that got us to what I call the plan of record in the Passios. And I'd be happy to scratch my memory to try to fill in how we got from one step to the other, but that's the basic outline.
You're muted, Michael.
Yep. So, Mr. McDonald, I know that you mentioned that you're a little short on time today. You sent me a couple a couple of documents. I just wanted to check, do you want me to pull any of them up specifically?
You know, how you doing all, by the way? I sent you all that stuff, Mr. Ray, so you can, Mr. Jeffrey, so you can pass it along to your committee. And one of the things I find interesting, like Jamie said, we wanted to keep the town hall bad. That was our symbol of the town. And I sent you some drawings from 1995 that the town paid $75,000 for. The prices went out at the time in 1997. I think it was coming in at $20 million to renovate the building. Then they found out that it's landlocked. And if you look at the lease, or if you look at the lines of the property, and Craig, you probably would probably know that, but it's right on, there's no property there. It's landlocked. The landlord owns the back end, the side of the building. Now, since then also, you've had mold problems in the basement. So if you look at the reports we sent you, that was a 6,000 plus square foot town hall, but you can't use the basement, which is 2,000 square feet, and you can't use the attic because of contamination. So that brings the building down to, I think, 3,500 square feet. So that's what the town hall, but I sent you that information so you can share it with the committee and go through what we went through. But the issue is more than just the building. I think we're all intelligent here. We all know our jobs. We all know what we do. There's something that has to bring it over the hump. And I believe, being on committees across the country, that you have to look at revitalization of the downtown. You just can't do a building. The town people don't want that. They want a vision. And I'm hoping you, of all the people, will come up with that vision. And the vision means that we may have to have a developer come in. We had a vision of building a apartment building over on School Street, putting the first floor, follow the guidelines, putting the first floor with some retail spaces and apartments above. I think the town could make more money that way. So sometimes the town has to invest to reap the benefits. A park is not going to help the town with taxes. Development will. And we had some good people working for us. One was Jay Lord, and Jamie can testify to that. He helped us with the village district bylaws. He's a great guy. And we also brought in some developers who built an example of Starbucks. They were very interested in building a Starbucks where the Brooks House is. The problem at the time was that we just came across the new guidelines and there was no drive-throughs put in. So kind of like one hand didn't work the other. So they weren't interested in coming. But my suggestion and comments to you would be to hire a person who does economic development planning, similar to Fitchburg. And Michael, I sent you some drawings of what's going on in Fitchburg. Fitchburg is investing into bringing back the downtown. They have a vision, and people are jumping on the bandwagon. And they have developers going in there and they want to build. And there's one that, if you guys haven't seen it, look on Main Street and Lunenburg Street, between the fire stations and the old Harper building. And they're creating people to come downtown. And I think that if you look at it that way and sell a vision to the town, this would pass. Because right now, a developer does not want to come into Lunenburg. It's just if I wanted to build something on School Street, how do I do it? And how much I going to invest? And will I get the town support to do it? And I can tell you right now, I don't think that will happen. And Matt, he would probably explain a lot on the planning board. You all have to let somebody else come in and do the work and present it to the town, because that's what I feel should be done.
All right, I want to open it up to the members of the committee to ask any clarifying questions, additional information that you're looking for. So however we want to do this, just go ahead and jump in. Mr. Black.
So can I ask, when you guys were looking at the Ritter, did you run into the same issue that we ran into, that since over 50% of it was going to be renovated, the cost to renovate when skyrocketed? Because, I mean, I know you gave us a number for the town hall, but what were you seeing with, I seen your plans for the Ritter, but did you get into that far with the Ritter to see that could have happened?
Go ahead, Dave.
You got that?
Yeah, sure.
By the way, I just said Ritter, I meant Passios. I'm sorry, I meant Passios, not Ritter.
Well, with all the buildings, we kind of looked at thresholds. They all contain a certain amount of asbestos, and at the time we were looking at it, if you did a minor renovation, you didn't have to do a full-blown decontamination, et cetera. But if you did more than a certain percent, you were dealing with up-to-date codes and a full remediation and some other things. So we always tried the cheap way first. But the truth of the matter is, even though we were dealing with 2013 numbers, the numbers got real high real fast once you went beyond minor alterations. And it certainly, if you had to bring it up to current code and ADA requirements and a total remediation, I think we didn't get all the way to where you got, where it was cheaper to do a total rebuild, but it was a little more expensive than we were willing to bite off at the time.
Plus, the other thing we looked at too, when Jamie says small projects, you can take that project and ultimately, over a 5-year period, accomplish what we wanted to do. The first phase was to bring in the town offices, which wouldn't have kicked in the construction documents, which we do historic buildings throughout the state, and we know the codes on that.
Mr. Beardmore.
Gentlemen, thank you both for taking the time to talk with us tonight. I'm wondering, so the path that we think we're on is to try to come to some conclusion and game plan for both the town hall and the Ritter, and begin to paint that picture in terms of what the programming of those buildings will potentially look like, and what the cost associated with preparing those buildings for that programming before we figure out what to do with TC Passios. And theoretically, because we'll have figured out the programming for Ritter and for the town hall, the requirements for TC Passios may be less and may get us under that threshold in the long run, and therefore allowing us to kind of address all 3 buildings that are of our primary concern right now. My question is, did you get into conversations about what could potentially make sense and potentially fit or potentially serve programming for school department or whatever in the town hall or Ritter? And do you think that any of those conversations have any bearing today, even if they may have been dismissed 6 or 7 years ago?
Jamie, if I may, can I not there?
Go ahead.
On the town hall, and it's a very good question, Peter, because one thing that town of Lunenburg likes, it's called an exit plan. There's really no exit plan because everything has to be approved at town meeting. But if it was me back then and today, I would take that town hall and turn that into a theater of arts. There's a lot of grants out there right now. And again, Fitchburg just did that with the theater down in on Main Street with the cooperation of the college. But people like to donate to the arts. This town is a lot of talented people in this town. And that's what I would pursue. I would get some people who could come in and turn that into a performing theater of arts. Either an art gallery downstairs and a theater upstairs. It's screaming for it. Again, that would be my recommendation.
Can you, along with Mr. Beardmore's question, I just pulled up something that you sent over to me today, Mr. McDonald, with some of the options that were discussed. As I recall, I think what ultimately the direction we chose to go in was along the lines of option number 4. I think that was kind of the intent, was that that's what made the most sense. But can you walk us, I think the old primary school is out of the equation at this point. I think too many years has gone by that building, and my view is no longer, you can no longer do anything with it, and the select board has an application to tear it down, which I believe is being voted on tonight. But can you speak to the Ritter building, option number 2, option number 3 here, option number 4? and what those conversations were about?
Sure. I don't have, I'm trying to do it from the screen. I don't have a hard copy of that in front of me, I don't think. Give me one. Oh, I do. Hold on. But
Mr. Ray, could you blow that up a little bit?
Sure.
just so I use the right numbers. The problem with options that included the Ritter or the town hall were that neither of their basic footprints, the way they were when we were looking at it, were large enough to accommodate the total program needs of municipal office space at the time. So two things had to happen. Our very first out of the gate was going to be to make town hall bigger and make it all fit in town hall. And as Dave said, we ran into the fact that we couldn't follow the expansion that was outlined in the plans from 1990. So the only option that included town hall was one that included some in town hall, some in the Ritter. And one of our design criteria was we didn't want it in two different places. We wanted them all under the same roof. That's what, we felt that we kind of had them in two places where we were, and it would just be reshuffling and end up in two.
If I can just stop for a moment there, just to show the committee what those plans were. The first time I saw them was earlier today when I got them in email. So this was, I believe this is kind of the plan for the expanded town hall.
This was in the 90s.
Yeah.
1989.
Was it 89?
And so going,
Michael, we didn't, I'll be honest, we didn't climb into these drawings as if we were going to build this, but we did take from it the idea that the existing town hall space that we were using was only a portion of what could be in that same, I'll use the word real loosely, envelope. Our thought was we could use the basement, what was called the basement and the attic, which weren't being used. And we could probably add, when we utilize 3 floors of that building instead of 2, we could probably add 1,300 square foot on each floor by just expanding a little bit. And I went down and spent some time. In fact, it's probably worth watching the YouTube from the 2013 meeting to the selectmen. It was like the building reuse committee had been in existence for 2 months, and we were just out of the gate, and we were hell-bent on doing it at town hall. I had gone down to Ashland, and Ashland basically had just spent $5 grand to redo their old town hall. So from the outside, it looked like the 1800s or early 1900s, but from the inside, it was modern office space, conference rooms that were really efficient. They basically had where their board of selectmen met, for instance, was about the size of our stage. It was just configured differently, like where our board of selectmen sat on the stage and the rest of the room was where the audience was. They had it configured in such a way that, about the size of the stage was configured differently, and they had their their meeting room for anything less than a real popular meeting was about the size of that stage. And we got real excited before we, really climbed into it. They spent about $5 million to do that. And in 2013, we said, oh, $5 million, that's way too much money. We're only going to, we're going to try to do this for, no more than $1 million. And so that was what kind of one of our walls. And, it's easy to kind of rewrite history, but if I'd have known we could have solved our problem for $5 million, I would have said, let's go. But we never climbed into the plans you're looking at now down to the level of, that was done in the 1990s and never implemented. It was a lot of money spent on the design, and then it never really even got off the ground at all. but it gave us the idea that it was possible to fit a whole lot more into the, the envelope that we currently call town hall.
All right.
The
I
one thing
think,
the one thing I'd like to say to Mr. Beardmore's point is two things I think you need to keep in the background that made our charter very different than yours. One is that we didn't get to, we have to save town hall and we have to save the Ritter until much further in the process. Our original charter was, we're going to build a new high school. We're going to end up with 5 surplus buildings. What can we do so we don't have 5 surplus buildings?
Yep.
Okay. The second thing that you kind of need to consider is that at the time, and this was before they even voted on the new school or, started figuring out what to put where, the school was on record as saying that they did not want any part of, or didn't need, I shouldn't say that, they didn't need anything beyond what amounted to their planned new middle high school, what's currently the Turkey Hill, and the new primary school, the one that's on Mass Ave, including the superintendent's office and all their ancillary programs and extended day and everything else. So they weren't part of any of our target plans in the very, very beginning. They became part of it when we started moving towards option 4, but they weren't part of any of the kind of original plans. The other point I want to make to Mr. Beardmore is, when we looked at what could you possibly do with town hall, I really thought that the historical society, not the historical commission, but the historical society that has that little building over on, off the old primary parking lot and across from the Ritter, would be interested. And I had a long meeting with them. I thought they'd be thrilled to take the town hall and make a museum out of it and move all their stuff over. And we were working on ways to make that feasible. And I was very surprised when, they're not a town organization. I mean, they certainly care about the town, but they're not part of our municipality. And their board kind of came back and said they wanted absolutely no part of that. They wouldn't consider moving into town hall, and they wanted no part of it at all. And, that's when we started talking about theater and everything else. But the downside on the theaters is then you start talking about occupancy requirements and, all sorts of different regulations that, if you're going to invite the public in and charge them to come in, what that building has to be able to withstand and how much that costs. But to go back to Michael's point, when we went through each of the options, the town hall fell off because it wasn't big enough. It would have to be in conjunction with the Ritter. Ritter fell off because the only way it stood alone as an option was to build another Ritter next to it, make it twice as large as it was. And if that was going to be the solution, and the current construction has that it's 2 floors, but they're not 2 separate floors. It's like they're I don't know how to describe it in architectural terms, but it's like a floor and a half. There's not a first floor and a second floor. There's a first floor of 1.5 floor, and then
it's like a split entry house kind of thing. Right?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that became very problematic very quickly, and that's why the option 3 and 4, which kind of drove us towards the patios, either with or without that extra wing, came to be our kind of our selection or our preference at the time. But again, it's really important to realize that we weren't trying to utilize all our buildings. We were trying to find a home for our municipal offices and then dispose of the surplus. Totally different objective.
All right.
Actually, Mr. Ray, I have one more question. Can you put that option 4 back up on the screen?
Sure. And then while I do this, afterwards, I would like to go around to each member just to give everyone the opportunity to ask a question if you have one before we wrap up this portion of our conversation today. And make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Okay. We can all see this okay?
Can you zoom in on option 4 a little bit?
Sure. There we go.
if you look at the part of the building over in the top northeast corner where it was being demoed, and if you look at that yellow line there, one of the things that I know we had a problem with, and Jamie, I don't know if we ever got an answer, was what the new lot lines are going to be. Has that been decided yet, where the actual lot lines are?
It's all one parcel.
Okay, so what happened was, if you look at that, try to follow that yellow line. And if you go up towards the direct north, it kind of cuts out to the west a little bit, keep on going the other way, right there. Well, that was all designated wetlands at the time, so we needed parking space because the town schools were taking away space for us to almost block this in. There wasn't enough parking on that space. So as a committee, we went to the conservation department and found out that that wasn't wetland. So that from that point where you are now, go right up to the driveway straight up, it all opened up for parking. And I don't know if the school ever took up above there. I don't know if the schools ever took that property away, but that was our egress and access for parking. Do you remember that, Jamie?
Mhm.
There's a gravel lot there now that,
That's-
it's kind of an overflow lot.
At the time, there wasn't, the school gave this back to the town, but it wasn't adequate parking because of the way the lot lines worked. So I hope that's been rectified.
I think that, Mr. Jeffries, with your permission,
Yes, of course.
I think that that area is now a gravel overflow parking lot, and overflows in quotes. I think if you ask the school department whether they consider that overflow, I think they might say that they use that on a pretty regular basis at this point. But I remember the discussions back then. I was a member of the middle high school building committee, and that whole area was supposed to be returned back to grass after the construction trailers were removed, because that's where the construction trailer area was when they staged during the construction process of the middle high school. And they had put that recycled asphalt product down there to kind of give staging space for their trailers and also for their, the contractors to park and things during construction. And we asked them to keep it and not return it to grass. And it's a good thing we did, because routinely, as a parent of kids that go to that school, routinely there's vehicles parked there. And yeah, the property lines have always been a question of, what's the status? It's never been formalized. We did draw a line in the sand during the middle high school project, mainly for the purposes of the MSBA, to establish the limit of work for the middle high school project. But there was never a property line that was officially delineated there, by way of an A&R plan through the planning board. So that's my 2 cents on that.
That was one of the issues that we had trying to figure it out. Like I said, the property lines kept moving, and
Yeah.
And that's why when we thought we got and we have that documentation that's on file with the conservation as far as the determination that the wetlands were not wetlands. That was a big chunk of space. And in fact, even a contractor who built the school had it all marked as far as wetlands. So, but it's there for somebody to take, I guess. Thank you, Mr. Jeffers.
Greg, do you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask Jamie or Dave?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you very much for coming. This is really informative to me. I was in town during that time, but admittedly wasn't paying much attention to the building reuse discussion at the time, and I appreciate you coming this evening. It really, really helps a lot. When you landed on the renovating the TCP wing for town offices, did you have a sense for, trying to frame this in the right way, what was the intent of the committee relative to the scope of work of that renovation? And if there was any presented, and did you have any expectation as to how much that might cost?
Yeah. Our scope of work, and we probably have it sliced several different ways by cost and square foot and several other things, but we were basically trying to find a home for 21 town employees who at the time was split between Town Hall and the Ritter, you know, giving some room for some expansion, a very small amount of meeting space, because the feeling was that we could, you know, have a few meeting rooms there, and then if we were going to leave the gymnasium and the cafeteria, we could figure out a way to make them, you know, for bigger meetings, etc. And PAC was always, when we thought of our needs, we always said PAC needs somewhere between, they originally had about 13,000 square feet. They wanted about 25. And so we always talked about 20, but they wanted to be well, they didn't want to, but it was our feeling it was important for them to be co-located with wherever the meetings were going to be, because they needed studio space that didn't have to be near the meetings, but they also broadcasted all of the meetings.
Mr. Toll, for clarification, are you saying 1,300 or square feet, or 13,000 square feet?
1,300, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
It was, they're high end. They probably needed about 2,400,
okay,
and they currently had about 900, and we were using about 2,000 when we kept trying to see what fit where. But basically, we felt that we could fit it all in one wing of the Passios, and we couldn't fit it in the old town hall or the Ritter without some extensive renovation. And
yeah,
when you say cost, you know, the Passios was already there. So it was, what does it cost to renovate? Depends on how, you know, are you going to stuff people in old classrooms and tell them to live with it, or are you going to make it look like a nice municipal building? And we had estimates all along that spectrum.
yep,
The other thing that was going on at the time was there was a lot of new schools going everywhere in the state of Massachusetts. There was a lot of money being given out. We visited some projects. In fact, we worked on one up in I think it was Shrewsbury or Auburn, where they took an old school and turned it into their town offices. It was the thing to do because all these schools were being vacated. So
Yep.
a lot of towns took advantage of that and said, hey, let's jump on board. In Lunenburg, we had the unique case of having a kitchen, which we talked about making a community kitchen for everybody. And also at the time to make it a shelter for an emergency. Right now, working with the Salvation Army, if there was a problem in town, we would set up at the Turkey Middle School. But here we could set up an emergency shelter in the old gymnasium and have the kitchen right there. So we thought it was a great idea to turn that into a community park more than anything, and moving maybe the farmer's market over in the parking lot or the concerts and turn it into a real community. And Michael, I sent you another plan from another gentleman who had a dream of the town. And Jamie, you remember his name?
Well, yeah, it was Harold. It was the guy who used to be our assessor, right?
Harold Scheid, yeah, Harold Scheid, sure.
He had a great vision, and I'm telling you, I was excited about it. In fact, Mr. Rogers was there. He took out his wallet, said he wanted to invest in it right then and there. But that's what we were talking about. But at the time, there was a lot of things going on in town, and the town offices now, thank God we kind of didn't do that and put money into the town hall because it's just too small. I mean, Lunenburg is 12,000 plus people today. Back then it was maybe 9,000, 10,000 people, Jamie. You know, we're talking 10, 12 years ago. And by the way, I hope you guys do what we did. You know, we were on this committee for 5 years or 6 years. And I hope you guys aren't going to be on there for 5 or 6 years. A lot of the work has been done. But now you just got to have put some brain power together and bring it over the finish line.
Well, so that's great. Thanks for that insight. And relative to brain power, I think this committee was benefited by the two of you present this evening on that front. So I appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Mr. Leighton?
Jamie, and thanks, Dave. I appreciate you being here tonight, sharing the information. I think the report that you guys made too was great too, very informative, and I think it just really leads up into why the TCP Building Design Committee was really created. It was because of the work that you did, so thank you. I didn't have any questions though.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Layton. Mr. Allison.
Yes, thank you both very much for coming. It has been very insightful. I've been involved with this for a good amount of time. I started planning at the same time the building reuse. I guess my biggest stick about this whole thing for the last 10 plus years is why did these buildings remain, well, the old primary specifically, and I mean, why did they stay vacant? I mean, the money to abate the asbestos to make them usable was pretty close in my estimation from the information provided to what was required to tear them down. So, I mean, did you guys ever think about spending a little bit of money then at something that had to be done anyway?
You know, Jamie, I can answer that one. First of all, people in town said no. I think you were one of them who opposed it at one time at the town meeting when we talked about turning the towns over to selectmen to be the guardians. I think it was you who got up and said you didn't want a Walmart at the center of town, if you remember that.
I certainly don't, but
you're the chairman of the planning board at the time. I think what you got to do is look at it as a business opportunity, not a personal one. And that's where I think this committee you guys are on, it should be a good one. It's great because you got all business minds on it. You got to get the feelings out of it and what's good for the town. But as far as our commission, we were commissioned to work with the selectmen. Why wasn't it done? I can't tell you that. Was it our recommendation? Our recommendation was to tear it down a long time ago. Why is it still standing? Town meeting, you know all as I do. We have to convince the people at home that we have their best interests at heart, either tearing it down, rebuilding it, or expanding it. And I, Matt, you and I talked about this. You know, I'm in favor of spending money in town to make money. I think that this downtown could be a really nice downtown area if it's done correctly. And we're going to trust you guys to do that. Thanks. I hope that answers your question, Matt.
yeah, pretty much. I just, yeah, it does. I appreciate you guys coming. Thank you. About the property line though, that I think should have been done when the high school was built. But
Tell me about it. You know what? It's very hard to design something, and you guys are architects and designers would know. You need to know where you're going to start and where you're going to end. And that line kept moving on us. And I thought it was solved by now, guys. I really did. And maybe Mr. Lathan would know more than I do. But you know, there's a lot of things. And I think if I remember right, Jamie, you might have some input about the Brooks House, if you remember, about widening that entrance and moving the Brook House. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I mean, but we never did, you know, it's tough to get the town to spend any kind of significant money unless you show them what they're spending it for. You know, we always knew that if we were going to sell the property, we were going to have a surveyed lot line. We always knew that if we were going to put something into any of these buildings, we were going to have to renovate them. But we never had the luxury of saying, you know, let's do survey lines or let's abate asbestos before we were able to give a vision to the town of what we were going to do at the other end of that. So, you know, nobody asked, and when they did ask, they got turned down because it was, well, come back when you have a solid plan of what you're going to do with it. The one thing I probably would love to get on your minds at least is the town did come together and all the competing interests agreed to create the village district and the architectural protection district because regardless of whether you felt it was important to protect the buildings or if town is going to sell them, make sure that the buyers had some restrictions on what they could do with them when they got here. The competing interests, the people could disagree on what we ought to do with things, but they did agree that we needed some framework. And I think it's important to say that the planning board and the historical society and the developer and the building reuse committee, who was kind of leaning towards disposing of surplus property, that there's three competing interests there. All could agree that in order to make that happen, we needed a framework, and the framework became the village district and the APDC. And, you know, I think the only reason I bring that up is that if you have a vision of what it looks like at the other end, you can then work out a lot of the details of how do you get there. And you can get the town to be interested in spending money on, you know, the interim steps.
Right.
I think also, Matt, when we were doing it, we were hoping that when the initial project was being done by a couple of people from the state of Massachusetts to build it into a senior apartment complex, they would take care of the abatement and stuff. Once that fell through, the town was hoping that it would sell it to a developer who could come in and either abate the building themselves and redo it themselves. And there was even talk about selling that building for $1. If Jamie, if I remember right, there was talk about that to keep the town off the hook. Sell it for $1, let the developer come in and collect the taxes, which again is another smart move. So there's a lot of reasons why it wasn't done. But one of the questions would be, why wasn't it maintained during when it was shut down? I think the town kind of abandoned it at the time. So it's two wrongs don't make a right.
Mr.
Actually,
Black. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Allison, do you have a follow-up?
No, that's okay. I think that was pretty much the point of my question about the abatement, was why didn't we continue to use these buildings and have them protected, the elements, and not just mothballed?
You know, one thing I did do today, Matt, I talked with the building department in lieu of coming to the meeting tonight, and I asked them, why is that building condemned? Why is that building not condemned is beyond me. Why is that building not locked up and posted no trespassing signs put on it? What if a child went in there and got hurt? Who's liable for that? To me, I think the town it's all liable on the town. That building should be secured and locked up, period. And it's not, and we all know what's in that building. I think, Matt, you've been in there, you know all the black mold all over the place. At least put some boards on it and posted no trespassing signs, because someone will get hurt and they'll sue the town. That's the way it works.
Mr. Blatt. Oh, you're still in mute.
I'm all set, sir. I just, I appreciate the time that these guys have spent, and it's, you know, I know, it's nice to see that the time that they put in and what they put together, that report, that assessment report, I think it's given me a lot of insight into what we could do and what we might do for the town. And I agree, it needs to be a complete concept of the complete town center that we present, not just a building that we talk about when we do this.
All right, thank you, Christina.
You're muted.
Oh, we're not hearing you, Christina.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to say, speaking, and I apologize, I was late. I had two questions. One of them I think you kind of answered, but I'll ask them together. You mentioned kind of moving the town hall away from the town hall. My current feeling on that is when we presented that and moved everything to the TCP, the town wasn't exactly happy with that. So I was wondering if that was an issue during your time as well. And my second question was, and maybe you discussed it and I missed it and I apologize for that. I saw the pictures and there's like one wing of the TCP, it looks like that was used. So what was the plan for the rest of the TCP?
Well, two questions. One is that we determined pretty early on that we couldn't put municipal offices in the building that we currently call Town Hall. So that when we started talking about the TCP, we were talking about municipal offices, but it, you know, as far as Town Hall goes, it was pretty clear early on, nobody wanted to tear it down. So part of the project was always, what do you do with that building? And you're probably always going to call it Town Hall or the old Town Hall or something like that. so that's to answer your first question. Your second question is that the option that was presented to the selectmen between option 4 and I think it was 4 and 4A was the current TCP with and without all three wings. And the Building Reuse Committee went in with a proposal that said tear the wing down, because then you don't have to maintain it and heat it and everything else. And our charter to find a home for municipal office space didn't require it. The selectmen at that point made the decision, gee, we're currently renting space out in that building. We could continue to rent space out in that wing. It's there already, you know, proceed with a plan of record that doesn't tear it down. So the option really that we presented was going forward is that the municipal town of Lunenburg would use one wing. The community of Lunenburg would use the part of the building that isn't a wing. It's the gym and the cafeteria, and that third wing would be available for some other use and would be paid for by whoever uses it. And, you know, that grew into people that are part of the town in various ways, the Boys and Girls Club, et cetera, saying, gee, I'd like that, or extended day, or some other, you know, various people that became part of what your first iteration looked at in terms of, quote, needs, weren't our needs when we started.
All right. Do you have any
When you said your generation, jeez.
do you have any follow-ups, Christina?
No, that answered it. Oh, I guess, sorry, when you said you took the municipal, like, one of the big things we heard, I feel like at the last town meeting, was that people didn't like the idea of the office building, municipal park being near the schools because of the traffic. Was that still an issue at your time, or people didn't really have that concern of moving that to TCP?
A small group of people had an issue of keeping the school campus, you know, separate from town people, but, you know, I don't think it was a major concern. Traffic was definitely a concern, but we felt that could be, you know, managed with a plan. You know, if we had all the property and a plan, we would have the ability to do various different egresses for different times of day, et cetera, and felt that we could plan around that. The sentiment about, you know, having, you know, the common citizen on the same property as the campus was a minority view, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
And also, Jamie, if you remember, back then, a lot of people were in favor of moving the town hall because of the sidewalks that were in poor shape. The accessibility was poor at the time. I think the town has taken care of that since then, but at the time, the patio of the old town hall, people were complaining about the color, you know, like the paint, blah, blah, blah. So I think a lot of people were excited to have it moved at the time.
Mr. Beardmore.
I think most of my questions have been answered. I just, as an editorial comment, I'm a little bit concerned about, you know, this talk of a vision for the entire center. Because I feel like we could get into a process of boiling the ocean and still be sitting here without a plan 2 years from now, rather than I'd like to have a plan, you know, a conceptual plan, perhaps 6 months from now. And I'm not sure that a full vision for the center of town is feasible for the current constitution of this committee. But maybe not, or maybe my definition of a vision might be different from yours. The other concern that I have is when we talk about programming in town hall that is not current programming, meaning we don't have a center for the arts, we don't have a community theater today. When we talk about programming that building for something that we are currently not programming for, what we're not doing is we're not crossing off square footage requirements that we would then need to put someplace else. And so as I'm thinking of this, first and foremost in my head is what can we cross off of the list that we previously had in TC Passios? And in doing that, we're reducing the amount of square footage that we would therefore need to renovate and program for, even if it costs us money in town hall, because one of the priorities is keep town hall, right? People like the town hall where it is. They like the idea of public access to that building. I think a lot of people like the idea of still having meetings, some kind of meetings in that building. And so there's a lot for us to figure out here. I'm not against having a bigger vision, but I think that, there are a lot of really practical things that we need to figure out over the course of the next 6 or 8 months or so that, are not going to give us the time or latitude to think about what we can do, potentially with properties that are adjacent to Town Hall, Ritter, 30 School Street. I think we might be biting off more than we can chew there.
If I could, Mr. Beedmore, one of the things that I agree with you, but I don't. And because what happens is when I was on the DPW committee, I was the chairman of the feasibility and the chairman of the construction. This town wants to know what you're going to do when you move out. And when you take the TCP, I think we're all in agreement that TCP is probably going to be the right move to bring the town offices and whatever. But the first thing people are going to say, well, what are you going to do with the town hall? Now, personally, the town hall to me, it's a symbol of Lunenburg. What can we do to keep it that won't cost $1 million to the town? Well, look at the performing arts and get grants. The Ritter building is another one, very good building. In fact, when we're on a committee, and Jamie would remember this, we got offered $650,000 for that building from a outside source who was an advisor, and make a great office park or office building for him. You just got to get the opportunity. And I think your biggest dilemma is you guys know the answers, but how do you get the town to go along with you? That's your key. And the only way I know is to be honest and come up with solutions.
Mr. Todd?
Mike, I just have a response to Mr. Beardmore, and I agree that if you wait until you have the total plan that takes care of all the variables, you'll be where I am, 10 years later, and you still don't have anything. But I will say that, and again, this is not an excuse of any sort, but remember, our charter when we started was predicated on they're going to build a new middle high school, and as a result, there's going to be nothing in the TCP. And now to hear Mr. Beardmore talk about it, if your plan goes someplace other than TCP, you have to find a home for all these things that are in TCP. They got there over the last 10 years while we worried about what we were going to do. Because the plan was you're going to have an empty building. And what do you do with that surplus building? And we came full circle to say, let's use it for everything. You guys are going the other direction, that you want to empty it out and find a home for everything. That's fine. But there wasn't supposed to be anything there. Yeah,
You're right. You're absolutely right. But the fact is that they're there now. And, when we have to build consensus that accounts for that use, right? Because there's a contingent of people that have a need for whatever those use cases are. And so we have to account for that, whether we like it or not. But there is an upside to that, right? This is largely a financial problem. And one of the things that we learned last fall, I think we all learned, is that, $30 million or $40 million is probably a little bit above our threshold here. And so if we want to do any kind of renovation of that building, or we want to put any kind of repurposing of that building that would include additional office space, we've got to be substantially under those numbers. And to do so probably means getting under that threshold where we have to, redo the make it earthquake proof and all this other stuff that we hit, with that total renovation threshold. Well, if we leave the ACE program in the North Wing, that's a substantial amount of stuff that we're not touching. If we leave PAC in the center, that's a substantial amount of stuff that we're not touching. If we're just doing the west wing of that building for town offices, well, if we're just doing that, that might get us under the threshold. Fine. But what are we doing with Ritter and Town Hall to be able to focus in that space? And maybe that's enough of a vision to get us to move and to get us some funding, to get the ball rolling. But, you know, I'm at least in my head, I'm really worried about those thresholds and figuring out how we can do this in a way that is cost effective while still maintaining uses for Ritter and Town Hall that contribute to the betterment of the community.
I want to provide Tony here with an opportunity as well to ask a question for Jamie or Dave about this, but I just want to I didn't mean intentionally to cut you off there, Peter. But
I was rambling. It's good.
Michael, if I could, just real quick to Peter. Peter, you just answered all the questions I'm saying to you. You have to hit A, B, and C to come up with D. And if you limited the TCP and remodel the town offices first, keep it under the threshold, budget every year on some kind of renovation in the TCP, find a solution to the town hall and the Ritter, you're on your way. Get that approved at town meeting, then you can start. The whole thing is getting something approved at town meeting. Thank you.
Tony?
Thank you, Michael. And my last name is not Ann Vicky. I have to go in and change that. Let me give you the perspective. I don't have any questions for Jamie or for Dave McDonald. I do have a comment about Dave McDonald's approach of creating some sort of a master plan. And, you know, when I first came to Lunenburg a year and a half ago, coming up on almost 2 years ago, I knew exactly where Town Hall was. I had no idea what the Ritter building was, and I didn't know where the primary school building was. And today, I think that, you know, listening to the conversations about, you know, creating some sort of a master plan, Dave, I think that we actually have kind of a default master plan that already exists in Lunenburg. And that is that if you look at traffic and activity flow from Town Hall down Memorial Drive, behind the library, past the senior citizens to TC Passios, you actually have a natural corridor for development. I think that if you cross over Route 2, you know, if you cross over Mass Avenue, you create a whole different issue with regards to pedestrian traffic. In fact, one of the things that I think you ought to do is, you know, look seriously at the disposal of properties on the other side of Mass Avenue and concentrate on Town Hall down to the TC Passios building. I'm going to tell you that I don't think that you're going to sell any of this plan unless you come up with a viable use for Town Hall. Ritter, on the margin, primary school, I think that boat has already sailed. I think that if you went to a town hall meeting and said, we're tearing down the town hall, you know, everyone raise their hand, all those in favor, I think you're going to get that done, you know, and this evening, primary school, excuse me. And this evening, Ritter might still be an issue, but for clear, I think for primary. And of course, you can't see the primary school building. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I didn't know it was there. And it's a horrible place to bring people in and out of because of its position relative to the cross of Main Street and Massachusetts Avenue. So, you know, I think that to your point, Dave, I think that, you know, we kind of do have a default master plan, and that master plan is from Town Hall down to the school complex, which includes, you know, TC Passios. Now, the other thing that I know from my experiences in doing historic preservation is that anytime you talk about adaptive reuse of a building like Town Hall, it does create a huge amount of challenges. You know, you have code issues, you have functionality issues. And, you know, one of the things that I think that you ought to look at is leave Town Hall, and put as many people in there as you can, like the select board, like the people who directly support the select board, and anybody else that you can put in there, and then figure out, and do that in a way that you minimize your use of town hall basement and town hall third floor, so that you can have a reasonable cost for rehab of town hall. And I think that if you could do that, I think that the voters who are going to pay for this would come to a town hall, come to an annual meeting and say, okay, you're keeping town hall. Now, how much more is it going to cost for us to effectively manage the business of the town of Lunenburg? You know, when I hear people talk about trying to put everybody who works for the town in town hall, it isn't going to work. And the irony of it is that the bulk of your employees aren't even close to town hall. The bulk of your employees are sitting on Chase Avenue at DPW, and the other bulk of the employees are sitting at the public safety building, you know, several miles away from where the select board sits, several miles away from where the the town manager sits. You know, so, you know, I think that to your point, Peter, I think you're saying we got to do something. You know, we got to figure out a way to get something done here. And I think that if you go to an annual meeting and you ask the voters to do something that doesn't include town hall, you're going to get nowhere. I think the Ritter, you're going to have to make a good case for that, you know, for not using Ritter or for spending money on Ritter. But clearly, I think for spending money on town hall, I think the voters will support that. And then you figure out how many more people, how much more space do we need for, for us to have an effective management of the town of Lunenburg. You know, in my business, I've always had a good project has three key pieces. It has to have a good designer, it has to have a good builder, and it has to have a good owner. And I think that what we're talking about, what this committee is talking about, is how to be a good owner. And I think that the key piece here is you've got to say, how much can we use town hall? How much of town hall can we use? And how much can we use that will cost us a reasonable amount of money, so that we can then say to the folks that have to pay for this, we're using town hall for town hall. And then for the pieces that don't fit at town hall, this is where we're going to put those pieces. And once again, going back to your point, Dave, is that if you say our plan includes that Memorial Drive area, you know, from the Boys and Girls Club, you know, to the senior citizens, you know, down to where, you know, you're now in the Lunenburg, athletic complex. I think that's a perfect plan to tell voters, this is why we're going to renovate TC Passios. And we're going to put those pieces that don't fit in town hall, we're going to put those pieces down here, and then figure out a way to make that a cost-effective move. So that's my thoughts, you know, based on the conversations that I've heard. I do think that a plan, you know, will absolutely positively make it easier to sell this to the voters, Dave. I completely agree with that.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Tony, for that. So I'm going to provide just some kind of final comments before we move on to the next topic. But first, I want to thank Jamie and Dave for taking the time tonight to meet with us. And you did send me today quite a bit of information. I will compile that into one email and forward that over to the members of the committee for them to have the opportunity to review as well. I don't think that I have too many questions. I think that the questions that were asked here tonight were pretty good. Clearly, there's a variety of perspectives on things that we're gonna have to iron out down the road. You know, I think that the approach that we're trying to take here at this stage is facility driven. That, you know, the next thing that we have on our agenda tonight, which I'm sure we'll pick up as well next week, is really going through these buildings, identifying what the identified needs are. And so that way, any plan that we come up with incorporates resolving all the identified needs. And I know that another part of this is going to be looking at those prioritizations that we've already done in the last couple of years and giving them another hard look. looking at the space that's currently being utilized by different departments versus the space that's being requested. And I think that just getting a different hard look on that one as well. And I think that that will land us in a position to be able to really start programming in and coming up with options for what we could do with Town Hall, what we can do with Ritter, what we can do with the TC Passio. So I think we're, the path that we're on, I think if we stay facility driven, I think that when we get to the point of how do we program all this, hopefully some of the answers will at that point be self-evident. So again, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Dave. And before we depart, I just want to give you a final opportunity if there's any words of advice that you'd like to provide to us.
No, just thank you for having us. And if I can be of any help to any of you individually or to you as a committee, I'm in the book.
Thank you. And Mr. McDonald?
Hey, Tony, you still there? I hope you have a wife named Vicky. Do you have a wife named?
I do. She's not with me right now, but I do.
It's
Yes,
probably
I
a
am
town
still
hall,
there.
but she didn't get in. Thank you very much for your comments and welcome to Lunenburg. And
Thank
as
you.
with Jamie, if you guys need anything at all, you all know how to get a hold of me. And before I go, Jamie, I just wanted to say I hope the people here are praying for the people in Ukraine, and God bless all of them. And again, God bless you guys for doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I think that was a really healthy discussion. So the next thing on our agenda tonight is reviewing some of the studies and going over any of the identified facility needs. But I have to ask if we can take a 2-3 minute pause for a second. And then let's pick this back up at 7:30.
Can I make one comment? We probably want to have Tony's last name for the minutes.
It's Scullambrini.
Oh, but good luck, Mr. Baker. Thank you. 7:30. Oh, gives us 4 minutes.
All right, how we doing, Peter? And Brian, good?
Doing well.
All right.
From 70 to 40 to 50 to 50, that feels like 40.
I know.
That's March. It's March for you.
Oh,
All right. Okay. I think Christina's going to join us here in a moment. So, sure, she'll need a second. All right.
I'm here.
Oh, great. I hear you. I don't see you, but oh, there we go. All right. All right. The next thing on our agenda tonight is for us to. So I'm just going to share our overall big thing that we came up with last time, just to remind us of kind of our big picture of what we're trying to do. So let me just go ahead and share this. So this is just reminding us what we brainstormed last week, or not last week, but at our last meeting, that you know, that we were going to review as part of this process, our major milestones, reviewing reports, review prioritization of programs, thinking outside the box, developing a timeline, and discussing, you know, different options for those, for how that can look. So I think what we're starting off with is on the reviewing report side and facility requirements. So before we get too deeply into this, I think that, has anyone kind of already made a list of things for Ritter, Town Hall, TCP, or Brooks? Honestly, I have not. So has anyone else?
I didn't make a list, but I did review I focused on the town hall and the Ritter,
Okay.
and kind of went through and prepared to talk a little bit about that.
So what's missing from my knowledge is I know we've knocked off a few things on these buildings over the course of the last few years. I'm just not sure what that is. And I think that that's, you know, pretty important to the story.
Yep. So I think the path ahead is that this may be a little too weedy for us tonight, but I think that what we may want to do is kind of break this up into sections, so that way we all kind of take a piece of this, so that at between meetings or at our next meeting, if members can send me an email that says, hey, for Ritter Building, this is what Vertex says. For Town Hall, this is what it says, TCP, and etc. Does that seem to be a good path forward?
if I might suggest, I know the sewer commission has done it in the past. We're a 7-member board with a 4-person quorum requirement, so we can work in groups of 2 to 3 together offline.
Yeah.
So Michael Ray, just a bit of context on this, just in terms of, you know, what exposure I've had to the capital plan through the finance committee, is that as items have been proposed over the last 3 years dealing with, in particular, Ritter and Town Hall, that there have been Vertex citations on those capital items, and, you know, to include stuff that's projected for, you know, up to 5 years out. And I can only imagine that the town manager has some of this information consolidated in a way that if we were to go start from Jump Street, it may be, you know, redundant or wasteful in our efforts.
So I do have that information, Mr. Beardmore. I think that what I'm suggesting is that we put that to the side and look at it with our own eyes to make sure that it's complete. If that makes sense. That you know, in other words, there is a work product that says this is what these buildings need. I think that if we start there, it almost I wouldn't say taints, but we need to verify that that list is right. And so what I'm saying is proposing that we do is we start from the reports themselves, we generate our own list, and then, you know, that becomes our kind of working document. So I follow you. I do understand. It's just there's no way to verify that that list was complete. Now, one thing that is helpful is as we look at these reports, there are some very clear recommendations, and I think that what may make sense, what I'm going to suggest is that we kind of divide this in half, and that half of us look at the Ritter, half of us look at Town Hall, and that we look at and we break the reports down. Does that make sense?
It seems like a good idea to me.
All right. So let me get a, and then we also have, keep in mind, we have the, so we have a couple reports here. So we're looking at the Vertex report for Ritter. So Vertex for Ritter. We also have Vertex report for Town Hall. And then we have what we've already kind of really combed through TC Passios. And then we have the Town Hall building assessment and space needs. And that's the TAP A.
TAP A.
Yep. So we have TAP A, and then we have the two Vertex reports that we referenced. Now, again, a reminder: these are available on the website. If you didn't pick up a printed copy, but if you would like to pick up a printed copy, save the ink at your own house, and you haven't already, you can go to the second floor of Town Hall, and Elaine will have that available for you. So what I think we're trying to do here is break this up, say, all right, who would like to look at Vertex for Town Hall? Perhaps this could be, as Matt suggested, a small working group of 3 members, 2 or 3 members. So 2 or 3 people that would like to look into Town Hall. Greg, you said you're excited that?
I'll do Town Hall.
All right. Would anyone like to do that with Greg? Together or at the same time? Brian looks like he wants to say yes.
Yeah, I was also just going to add that I've looked through the Vertex reports, and I found something. The most interesting part was how TC Passios had just had the highest ticket item. They had it at just under $3 million in total of things, and then you look at the Town Hall, and they have about just under $150,000 worth of stuff. So it was like, it seemed minimal in those dollar days of whatever year it was, but just minimal amount of information, amount of dollar amount. And same thing for the Ritter. The Ritter was just under $300,000. So it just seems like there's not a major renovations, major costs associated with it, at least in those days dollars. And I think also, I just want to add too, I think we're going to be able to see what has been done, looking at the capital plan the last couple of years. But also I look at it in most of the capital plans, like the first thing that they want to get done is the remediation of the hazardous materials.
Yep. All right.
So are you suggesting that we pair up or go in groups of 3 and try to find a time between now and next meeting and hammer out a list?
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting.
Well, I'm happy to try to do that with Brian
Okay.
on Town Hall if he's willing.
Sounds
All
good.
right. Who would like to work on Ritter together?
I think I should probably work on Ritter since I'm probably most familiar with it.
Great. And anyone want to work with Matt on Ritter?
I could.
Peter, great. All right. Is Dave Blatt, let me stop screen sharing here. Is Dave Blatt still with us? Or do
We
you?
lost him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. The next one is.
That means you can volunteer him for whatever task that you want.
All right. So we got to look at TAP A as well. So let's see, Christina.
Yep.
All right.
Voluntold.
Yep. So I'm gonna ask you and Dave, and I think the best thing to do with Tap A is focus on the town hall side of it, if you
Okay.
can.
Yep.
And then I will ask Mr. Blatt to focus on the Ritter side of the Tap A. All right, what I will do is I will work on what's been done since these reports came out to the present day. So what's already been done. And then I'll template out the form that we're going to record this in.
So you want a list of, based on those reports, a list of recommendations that were made out of those reports of things that needed to be done to the buildings,
Yes,
and just bullet them out in a list.
correct.
Okay,
Yes. And if you can also make in your list, just make reference to the page number that you got that from, the source, that would be helpful.
okay.
All right. So just repeating that's Town Hall, Greg and Brian, Vertex, Vertex Town Hall, Greg and Brian, Vertex Ritter, Matt and Peter, and Tap A, Christina for Town Hall, Dave Blatt for Ritter, and then I'll work on the list of what we've done in the last 6 years.
Sorry, the copies that I got, I picked them up today. They don't have page numbers on the text.
On the upper right. The one that I got there on the upper right.
For the Tap A, I think they were every other, but I don't see them anywhere on.
Yep.
No. If
You're
you're on the
correct.
pages, no, they're on some of them, like the tables go 1, 2, and 3, but like
Yeah.
Mr. Beardmore said, on the upper right, it'll say Ritter Memorial Building and then privileged.
It's not on
couple.
every page. It's kind of where there's
Yeah.
that header.
If you end up quoting an appendix or a table, if you just reference the appendix or the table. And I think the page numbers are the first like half the document.
Yeah, oh, there you go. Yep. Top
So-
right on the, up to page 43.
Yeah.
So I have a question about the town hall. I guess I looked through it quickly, so I might be wrong, but depending on what option you went with, changed the renovation or the scope of renovation. So do you want kind of the consensus between all the renovations, or what you think actually has to be done to make it a usable building for?
Yeah, the consensus between all the recommendations. So the idea here is that we come back next week and we have a list of what is being recommended as a must be done to the building in order to use it for any kind of, future use. So we're trying to do not the nice to haves, the must haves, what we must do. That no matter what we program in these buildings, this is what we have to get done no matter what. I think that's what we're trying to bare bones lock down, are the musts. And all right. The other thing I'll work on for next meeting is I'll keep the same agenda topics, which the next one is to discuss the priorities. So I will then take the priorities that the TCP Design Committee did. We have that in previous presentation, and I'll put that into kind of another format for us to see and talk about. So the intent would be that the next meeting, we're looking over these recommendations, we're fine tuning this list of what needs to happen. We have all that identified, and then we make we cross off the things that have already been done. And then we start the discussion on how we prioritize, and that we look at what we've already done for priorities, and that we start the process of taking another look at those priorities. And again, we're doing all this kind of in individual silos. And I think the intent, again, is the end of all this is when we start to try to put it all together in a way that makes sense. All right. Does that work for everyone?
Yep.
Okay. Like all right. So the next thing on our agenda is a discussion with the committee. I'm not sure whose feedback that is. I think that's you, Greg. I got it. So the next thing on our agenda is discussion about committee communications. So has there been any correspondence to and from the committee in the last 2 weeks? And I just muted you, Matt, just to stop the feedback.
I have
Yes,
some informal feedback
sure.
that I'll share here. You know, I know there was significant discussion tonight about that maybe the ship has sailed on School Street. But I've heard a few comments in the community about, you know, sort of a question. Why aren't we looking at School Street for the for a new town hall? You know, so I don't know. I bring that up just because it was brought up to me. I know that the nuances behind that property are deep and the history is long, but I have received that feedback from folks. And, you know, my retort was, well, we did a survey on that. And, you know, town hall, using that property for town hall was pretty far down on the survey hierarchy. You know, not so many people thought that that was the best idea. But I think the sentiment still exists. So I know that I'm not suggesting we revamp from what you just said. I'm just saying that I'm just thinking that keeping our options open for options that might not include currently either TCP and Ritter and Town Hall might not be the wrong approach. I mean, I just think that maybe we keep those type of options on the table. But I think that the steps that we're talking about with inventories of those buildings is definitely the place to start. But that's the only feedback I've gotten from the community in the last couple of weeks.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that feedback, Mr. Roy. I think that I think so that we all have the same frame of reference. That property is the select board put in a request to demolish the building. There's a meeting tonight by the APDC to decide on that request. And then so
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just bringing it up because people have asked me. So
yeah, I think that I don't know if my opinion is that ship has sailed. However, I think that the article that's going to be before the town this spring is not going to be to build a park. It's going to be to abate the asbestos in the building and to tear the building down. And I think that the approach from the select board is a little bit phased in this, that we get the building down as part of like the first process, and then we start working on more detailed construction documents to convert to a park, and then we'll be at the decision point with the town on voting for that park or not.
I think that's the right way to go. We got to take the building down no matter what we do.
Yeah, no matter what. And so I mean, there is, if the town, of course, votes against a park, of course, it's all the complications because the park that we worked on with the design consultant that the select board worked on through community meetings, and really, I'll tell you, to me, this plan is about as basic as you get when it comes to what's going to happen there. So it's taking the building footprint, tearing down the building, but leaving that footprint and using it as kind of the four corners would become almost like a bench area for people to sit at, but that would become kind of like the main covered pavilion type space. It is not touching most of the geography or topography of the land. So trying to keep everything as close to current as possible with some minor modifications on the very back end of the property. It's using that existing hill to kind of build into it, to turn it into some form of amphitheater seating. And again, it's trying to keep that parcel as close as it is now, just make it usable. And with the parking lot, no matter what kind of configuration we came up with, I think we only came up with 6 additional parking spaces. And so unless we start putting more down near the Ritter building. And the price quote was, with all things included, $4.5 million. So if the town's not going to vote for a $4.5 million park, you know, we can estimate what a building would cost on that site. That would be significantly more. You know, I think that we are trying to work with a budget this time around of a limit of $20 million. And I think that that's a self-imposed limit. And, but as I mentioned at the last meeting, you know, if we find another source of revenue, such as some solar panels on the old town dump that provides a steady source of income that can help pay for some of this, we may be able to do something that's larger than $20 million. But at this junction, I think that that's our limitation.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is, well, no, I recant. I'm not gonna say that. I guess I'll just say that there might be a difference in the mind's eye of folks of a $4 million investment in a park versus a 20 million or so investment in a building.
Yeah.
You know, I think those might be viewed differently. So I'll just go on record. I think it's the right move to tear the building down and to get that taken care of. But I just want to encourage us that there definitely are folks in town that are interested in pursuing that option. Maybe not just on that property, but maybe other properties. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it's fully off the table when we get into other options, because we don't know that we don't have a disposition set for that parcel yet.
Yep.
Any other communications to or from the committee?
No, but can I ask a question?
Of course.
Does the 4.5 include the tear down of the building, or is that just the park?
Yes.
Oh, so see,
All
that's
in.
not, it's not that bad when you.
No, it's not that.
No, and it's worth mentioning that the asbestos mitigation is part of the capital plan for this year, and the tear down is part of a separate article. So if both of those were to pass, we'd be about $1 million into that 4.5, just coming out of this town meeting. Rough numbers. I don't have the specific figures in my head right now, but and there are funds at the discretion of the select board in the form of ARPA funds that are available, that if we are going to spend, we'll need to spend inside of the next, we'll have to appropriate by the select board within the next 2.5 years. So there are some paths to potentially funding this that don't include debt service.
And that ARPA funding is a little over 3 million, as I recall.
Yep.
About 3.5. Okay. All right. So we don't have any social media. Brian, do you have any updates on social media? Anything you want to talk about there?
I think I just wanted to get a sense from the committee too, if it was okay to post agendas on social media and anything else that you guys wanted to see out there.
Of course.
All right, so
I would say
start
yes
posting
for
the
me,
agendas
but
early.
I think we need to go around the horn. Is everyone nodding yes to that? Yes. Yes. Mr. Allison.
Yeah, we had kind of given me the authority to post, but not what to post, and what I think it was more of what the committee wanted to post. So I just wanted to get a sense of what we wanted to post as of now.
So
I think agendas are always fair game for me. And anything that's going to be a public document anyway seems to me to be fair game.
Yeah, I would advise, day in advance. Building Design Committee is meeting Monday night. These are the topics of discussion, and a link to the agenda in the town calendar.
Yeah, that sounds good. And if there's any additional stuff, I think it's great, Michael, Ray, to just keep it on the agenda so we can, at the end of the meeting, say, okay, let's share this or share this, and I can get that out there.
Okay. Mr. Allison, did you have anything else?
yeah, no, pretty much Peter covered it. I was gonna just suggest that you point to the town website as often as possible, because most of the data is already there, I think, a lot of it.
All right. All right, I don't have any minutes in front of me to review or approve. So future meeting schedule, next meeting is going to be on April the 4th. We rescheduled the second meeting in April to April the 13th. I will not be here for that meeting. So that will be Mr. Blatt. So yeah, I forgot as we were planning last meeting to reschedule this, that I had tickets to go see To Kill a Mockingbird play.
Oh, wow, cool.
So, yeah. So my birthday is the end of April. So rather than do something special, it's going to be kind of a couple of days throughout the month. So because I do have to work on my birthday this year.
Would it be worth just canceling that meeting since we're having two back to back? Or, I mean, I guess we can see how next meeting goes, but maybe I just.
I think we should see how next meeting goes. And then after that, the next meeting and the meeting in May will be the first Monday before town meeting, and then the next one will be on May the 16th. All right, any comments tonight from the public?
I'll represent the public. The one comment about the committee that was it the two gentlemen who have worked on this stuff before. I hope that you all become good owners and bring this to a close for the town to vote on. It won't be this May, but maybe in the fall, there'll be some substantial progress made. You really can't let it continue to drag on and on and on. So from a member of the public, that's what I would highly recommend. You know, bring it back to the public for a vote as soon as you can.
Yep. Any public comments from the board tonight? Yes, Mr. Roy.
I'd like to thank Tony for coming. I've corresponded with Tony a few times. Tony and I share the same career path, both civil engineers. And I want to say publicly that when Tony stood up at the last town meeting and spoke his piece about this, I was very impressed. And I'm really glad that you're here participating in this process, even in spite of the fact that you're not on the committee. I think that you have valuable insight in this process. I appreciated your comments this evening. And I think that you could be a very big part of moving this forward in a decisive manner, say at the fall town meeting. So I appreciate you coming and I appreciate your insight and I really value it. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate those comments, but you guys have been working on this longer than I have. So let's get the ball over the goal line.
All right, any other public comments tonight? Yes, Mr. Beardmore.
So I just want to call attention to the town meeting as a milestone. And we had discussed the last meeting, perhaps publishing a handout for that meeting that kind of, formulates our approach at least, and maybe set some expectations for the fall. So I'm wondering, are we planning to have that discussion, or do we have a game plan in terms of outlining that communication or what have you? I just don't want it to get to be mid-April before we start thinking about that.
All right, I will add that to the end of next week's agenda for us to bring up to discuss. And it's looking like we will need to meet a second time in April to talk about it again as well. So let me just make the note.
If I could suggest, refreshing my memory, we're looking at doing an update.
Yeah, but in written form. So what we discussed was in lieu of putting an article, because we really don't know what we would ask for in terms of funding or what have you, in lieu of taking up an unnecessary 15 or 20 minutes for a verbal report, we had discussed doing sort of a handout that was a written report, an update. The committee is reformulated. Here's the new charge. And this is the path that we're on, basically.
So could I suggest that in advance of the next meeting that we get something drafted so that we can review it? Because I think that'll be more productive than just having it as an agenda item. And I guess since I'm opening my mouth, I have to be willing to perhaps be willing to draft that. So I'm willing to draft something that the committee could then review during that agenda item if that pleases the chair.
Of course.
Okay.
You knew that was going to be an of course, right?
I'll draft something that we can look at.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. All right, I did have a comment as well, but I think most of it has kind of escaped me. So rather than blabber, I'll save it for next time. Any final comments tonight? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second.
Excellent. We'll do this roll call. Mr. Beardmore.
Aye.
Christina, how do you say your last name? Masitis?
Yep.
All right, Mrs. Masitis.
Hi.
Mr. Roy.
Aye.
Mr. Leighton.
Aye.
Mr. Allison.
Aye. Aye.
He's frozen.
Aye.
Yep.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
You're
Have a good
frozen.
evening.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Well, good night.